Donald Trump did an interview with a local news station, and these local interviews have really been going poorly for him. Here, once again, that took place. And he got asked about his stance on contraception because many in the Republican Party very much want to restrict access to contraception and the right to contraception, not to mention the other ways they want to impede people's reproductive freedoms. But here he gets asked about that. Does the normal Trumpian thing where he really struggles to answer. And that caused backlash. And so then Trump melted down later on social media based on this issue. So before doing anything else, here's this first moment from the interview.
So related to this is the whole issue of contraceptives. Do you support any restrictions on a person's right to contraception?
Well, we're looking at that, and I'm going to have a policy on that very shortly. And I think it's something that you'll find interesting, and it's another issue that's very interesting. But you will find it, I think, very smart. I think it's a smart decision. But we'll be releasing it very soon.
The most Trumpian thing in the world is to get asked about a policy stance, which presumably, if you're trying to become the most powerful person in the world, you would sort of know where you stand on things and how you would govern. But his answer is so often, far too often, we have something coming out on that very soon. And it's the stance he really wants to articulate is, I just want you to blindly vote for me, and then I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. Because he's saying it's going to be exactly, I know you, and you're going to love it, okay? You're going to love the plan that I'm going to propose. Just when I don't end up proposing it, make sure you remember that you loved it, if that makes sense. Hopefully we've cleared it up on this issue. And some reporting on this, Associated Press reports, Trump says he's open to restrictions on contraception before backing away from the statement. You have Axios also, Trump backtracks on looking at restrictions on contraceptives. Because when you say, we're looking at that, which is exactly how he started his response, and then follow it with, we're looking at some plan. Yeah, people are going to say, wait, you're looking at a plan that you're going to be releasing in 2 weeks along with your healthcare plan about contraception. So you're saying a plan about restrictions, or protections? And people accurately reported on as he's open to it. And then that caused him to release. Actually, before looking at his meltdown, let me show you another clip from this interview.
That suggests that you may want to support some restrictions, like the morning after pill or something.
We are also, things really do have a lot to do with the states. And some states are going to have different policies than others.
Okay, so now after saying he's about to release a plan, presumably that relates to the federal level, now he's saying, I don't know, the states can do whatever they want. I already told you, host of this show, that the important thing that your viewers need to know is they should vote for me regardless. Then he posted this on social media. I have never and will never advocate imposing restrictions on birth control or other contraceptives. This is a Democrat-fabricated lie, misinformation, and disinformation, because they have nothing else to run on except failure, poverty, and death. Wow. I do not support a ban on birth control, and neither will the Republican Party. So if he's so clear in this post, why couldn't he have said that in the interview? Well, because you know that he just has these floppy, meaningless principles that aren't really principles. So then those can move with the political wind. And his campaign saw the outrage based on him being open to restrictions on contraception and had to get out in front of it and have him post that. But even in that, he's lying. He's trying to say that the Republican Party at large, not just his stance, but the Republican Party, is not going to try to ban or restrict birth control or other contraceptives. Well, that's just not true. As Axios report, Democrats have seized on the Life at Conception Act, a Republican-led bill that grants equal protections for all stages of life, quote, all stages of life, including the moment of fertilization, a quote from that bill. And Speaker of the House Mike Johnson co-sponsored this, so the leader of the party in the House of Representatives. Trump's trying to say none of the GOP is for this, but then the leader of the party in the House is for it, which is giving full personhood, equal protections as a human being at the moment of fertilization, which would obliterate reproductive freedoms, including contraception. And that's something that over 100, like 170 something or 190 something Republicans sign on to, not to mention the Speaker of the House. Now, I want to show you while we're on this topic, Kamala Harris, then we'll get back to this interview that Trump did with that same station. Kamala Harris speaking to the harm that's been done by Trump given his impact on the Supreme Court. And he promised to do this, and then he did it. And that's obviously focusing on abortion rights specifically, but it could go further.
2 years ago, I stood on the stage at this very gala and said what we were all feeling that evening. How dare they? How dare they? And that evening, I also made a prediction. Overturning Roe would be the opening shot in a full-on assault, state by state, on reproductive freedom. And that is exactly what has happened. Roe was indeed overturned, and in states across our nation, extremists have proposed and passed laws to criminalize doctors and to punish women. Laws that threaten doctors and nurses with prison time, even for life, simply for providing reproductive care. Laws that make no exception for rape and incest. Even trying to revive laws from the 1800s. And understand, as Amanda said, who is to blame? Former President Donald Trump did this.
Yeah, so on abortion rights, it's undeniable, but a lot of people don't make that connection in their head enough. A lot of people are very outraged by what's happening in different states and the rights of women being stripped away and just the impact, these horrific stories that are coming out of states with these bans. But the connection's not being made enough, at least is my opinion, to Trump being the person who started the falling down of those dominoes. And so he needs to be blamed and electorally needs to be punished based on him promising to do what he ended up doing, and that caused all the harm that we're now experiencing. I'll also play you a clip of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez speaking to this issue as well.
In the way that they did. They're trying to walk it back now so that they don't look publicly accountable. But I want to be very clear that this was intentional and that this is exactly what Republicans have been going for. We've seen it. They've made, you have the Heritage Foundation, you have lots of folks who are on record saying, you know, not only do they want to go after abortion? Not only do they want to go after reproductive freedom, they're going after IVF, they're going after contraception. We have a mifepristone ruling that is coming down from the Supreme Court, and Clarence Thomas enriching himself from the same folks who are saying that they are trying to control women's bodies quite explicitly and going beyond that. They also want to control what they call recreational sex.
Yes.
Recreational sex. This is so clearly a patriarchal theocracy that has embodied itself in the DNA of an entire political party in the United States of America.
Yeah, so I think at this point, we just can't take at face value the words of people like Trump and some of these other Republicans who, in campaign season, they're sort of trying to backtrack on some of these things as it pertains to reproductive rights. And we just can't believe them. We've seen their track record. So let's just look at that, focus on that, and vote based on that instead of trying to decipher the incoherent ramblings of the likes of Trump. Now, I promised you we'd get back to more from this interview. I'll play this clip on the 2020 election.
You see what happened. 2,000 mules. Take a look at 2,000 mules. You see what happened. They dropped ballots into boxes. The ballots, many of them weren't even signed. We had many cases where you had more ballots than you had voters. It's a very primitive system. It's a very, very third world system. And not in all states, but in many of the swing states, which are very important for this, very terrible things go on.
Well,
very terrible
but the courts didn't agree with any of the claims.
Say it again?
I'm sorry, the courts in Pennsylvania did not seem to agree with any of the claims of anything going wrong in the 2020 election.
They didn't have the courage to do what they had to do. The courts were very disappointing. They didn't have the courage to do what they had to do.
Yeah. Translation, they didn't have the courage to intervene in a free, fair, and secure election, despite what he said there, and declare him the winner for no reason other than serving him. And it is crazy. Whenever he'll go through the list of things, 2,000 mules, my goodness, how long has that been debunked in the claims in that, can you call it a documentary? Whatever it was more of a fictional film. That's been ripped to shreds given the absurdity of what they're trying to claim there and the lack of actual evidence and everything else that he walked through. It was a good point from the reporter there. If you actually had this evidence that's so strong, how many times has it been said? Then you would have brought it into court, but you couldn't, and you failed over and over and over again. Not to mention people who worked for your campaign, were paid by your campaign to look into these claims, have come out and said, couldn't find anything, not to mention all the recounts, the audits, the investigations, etc., etc., etc. But he's still pushing that, which is pretty wild. I can't even imagine what we're going to hear if he loses in November. Now, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier in the day. This Trump video, just while we're on the subject of Trump, because I want to show you Biden's response to this. Trump posted this video on Truth Social. He's since taken it down because of the outrage, but he posted a video where it's talking about him if he wins, and so then showing sort of what the newspaper clippings would look like if he were to win in November. And in the clippings, it says creation of a unified Reich. 2 times that's shown during the ad. Again, we talked about this previously, and that got deleted because people were justifiably freaking out over it. And it's just yet another example of Trump's, what do you want to call it, alluding to Hitler or saying and doing things parallel to the actions and words of Hitler. However you describe it, another example of that frightening behavior. And here's President Joe Biden responding to it.
What's next for America?
Is this on his official account? Wow. A unified Reich? That's Hitler's language. That's not America's. He cares about holding on to power. I care about you.
And I think that's absolutely correct. He captioned this, Donald Trump posted an ad echoing the language of Nazi Germany. He only cares about holding on to power. I care about you. And I will say that's something that we've talked about many times with Trump so transparently running this whole campaign. Honestly, it seems to keep himself out of prison, seeing if he can get into the White House to protect himself from his own legal troubles. He's using the money of his donors, of MAGA folks, to pay for his own legal expenses. He got himself into trouble, and now it's his followers who are paying for it. At least financially, Trump might have to pay with his freedom eventually. But right now, it's MAGA donors who are paying for his legal expenses, and he's in it for himself. And that's something that seems so apparent and clear, but a lot of MAGA people that you talk to, that I've talked to, think he's like a messiah here to save them somehow, and they're watching him stand in between their own persecution and those who are trying to persecute them, and he's bravely taking the pain that they deserve. Something like that. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments, and please make sure you are subscribed to this YouTube channel.